So picture this, in just one weekend, after 21 hours of secret high-stakes talks, the whole thing just collapses. The US and Iran go from this fragile peace right to the edge of a new crisis. So today, let's unpack what happened, why it all fell apart, and what on earth comes next on this really treacherous path.
All right, before we even touch on the nuclear proposals or the failed talks, we have to talk about the elephant in the room. It's this one thing that overshadows every single negotiation, a deep historical legacy of mistrust.
You know, this quote from U.S. Vice President JD Vance really just nails it. This isn't just about policy details. It's about this fundamental belief on both sides that the other guys are negotiating in bad faith. And like Vance says, you don't fix that kind of history in a weekend. It's like this ghost that haunts every single attempt to make a deal.
So, okay, with that huge level of mistrust as the backdrop, how do you even begin? I mean, where do you start? Well, recently, both sides tried to find an answer with these incredibly high-stakes negotiations in Pakistan. The goal? To try and turn a fragile ceasefire into a real, lasting deal.
And look, this wasn't just another diplomatic get-together. This was the highest-level face-to-face engagement between American and Iranian officials in decades. I mean, the fact that it even happened at all was a monumental step. It really signaled a potential major shift in the relationship.
And believe me, they put in the time. Over 21 hours of negotiations. That number, it's not just about how long they were in a room. It represents a total marathon effort to hammer out an incredibly complex deal. It just goes to show you how seriously both sides were taking this opportunity.
But even after all that, 21 hours, they just couldn't build that bridge. The talks collapsed with no breakthrough, leaving this one huge question just hanging in the air. What went wrong?
So why did 21 hours of historic talks just fall apart? Well, the answer comes down to the single most contentious issue between these two nations, Iran's nuclear program.
And this right here, this shows you just how massive the divide really was. The U.S. came in proposing a 20-year stop to all uranium enrichment, a long-term guarantee. Iran's counteroffer? Just 5 years. Now that 15-year gap, it's not just a number. It represents a fundamental, deep disagreement on the timeline for trust and for verification. It was a chasm just way too wide to cross in a single weekend.
So with the diplomatic path completely stalled, the whole dynamic shifted, and it shifted almost immediately. The collapse of the talks triggered a direct response from Washington, and they decided to seriously ramp up the pressure on Tehran.
Yeah, the fallout was immediate. It was almost predictable, really. The talks collapse, and what happens next? Washington enforces a naval blockade. Just like that, the economic and military stakes are instantly raised, and the whole dynamic flips from negotiation to confrontation.
And make no mistake, this blockade is a serious escalation. By stopping ships from getting into or out of Iranian ports through the Strait of Hormuz, which is one of the world's most critical oil choke points, the U.S. is applying maximum economic pressure. It's a move that's designed to force Iran back to the table, but it also carries this immense risk of a military miscalculation.
And yet, despite the failed talks, despite this new blockade, the door to diplomacy wasn't completely slammed shut. Right in the middle of all this rising tension, officials on both sides started pointing to a very narrow but still existing path to peace.
So here's where things stand. Crucially, that fragile ceasefire, it's still holding. There's even talk of resuming negotiations back in Pakistan, maybe within days. But maybe the most surprising signal came from Vice President Vance himself. Even after the talks collapsed, he said he feels very good about where we are and that he believes the Iranian negotiators still genuinely want to make a deal.
So really, this all comes down to one critical reality. There is a very, very narrow window of opportunity that remains open. The ceasefire right now has created this moment of fragile calm, a chance for negotiators to get back to the table and try to turn this temporary truce into a real, lasting political settlement. But you gotta believe that window is closing fast.
And so, here we are, left with the fundamental question, right? We've just seen this incredible diplomatic effort clash head-on with the powerful, almost gravitational pull of historical mistrust. As both sides weigh their next moves, the future of this incredibly volatile relationship is going to be defined by one thing. Which of these two forces proves to be stronger?